a podcast presented by Bet365. We are part of the Volume Podcast Network. I am Chad Millman, Chief Content Officer of the Action Network. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my companion, my compadre, my BFF professional better, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Chad. Did you enjoy your Hard Knocks?
Oh, my God. Let me tell you something, Simon.
Tell me.
I got home I was in New York City yesterday, Manhattan. I was in the Action Network offices. And I got home. I got home about 10 after 9. My son was there. He was waiting. It was already teed up. I
Oh, man,
sat
to be
down.
loved. So it must be nice to be loved by someone.
We were so ready. And I loved it. I loved every second of it. I loved the intro of Chicago. It felt so nostalgic for me, especially because my son and I had just been in Chicago the week before with my dad, and we had gone to half the places that are sort of in the intro when they are showing the beauty shots of Chicago, and it was great. Um, so I thought it was magnificent. I thought it was great the way they showed Caleb Williams struggling. I like the way he presented himself. I'm not sold on Eberflus yet. I feel like this could be the one and done. And I'm curious to see how they portray his relationship with Caleb Williams. They already tried to set it up as something that needs to be special. But even at one point, I know this is stupid. At one point, when they were in the locker room and they showed the players sort of in their uniforms, I said to my kid, I just love those uniforms. Like
Yeah.
just seeing the Bears, those white pants, those navy jerseys. I
They're
can't
like
get.
Green Bay, right? They have never changed, or have they changed since the
I mean, look, they have the
1940s?
way throwback where they had like these Wolverine style helmets from the 1920s and stuff, but
Right.
it's been a sea with navy jerseys and white pants forever.
It's
It's
perfect.
Thank you for asking. I loved it. Loved it. Also, you know what I love? I love the fact we're doing these division previews. And for today's fourth installment in our annual NFL division preview series, we discuss the AFC North. We are joined by a very special returning guest. He's an NFL expert, and he is fresh off the release of his 559-page Sharp Football Analysis 2024 NFL preview, available now. I have been reading it. I have been tearing pages out and circling things. The strength of schedule rankings that we use in the podcast for our division previews are all from his book. It is Warren Sharp. Everybody.
Thank you, Chad.
I'm glad you're back. We got a lot to discuss. The AFC North, best division in football. Rest, which you have done a phenomenal job the past few years. We've had you on the podcast talking about this, determining rest as a factor in the schedule and how it can be advantageous or disadvantageous to teams based on when they are getting teams off of buys, when they are getting teams off of short weeks. And the same is true for them, off of buys, off of short weeks, etc. It's becoming more and more complicated with the expanded schedule. A lot of teams have an advantage. A lot of teams have a disadvantage, including teams in this division. We're going to get to all that, plus our breakdown of where the value is in the division. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for the biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Reminder, every division in 19 of the past 21 years, an NFL team has gone from worst to first in its division. I'm telling you right now, That stat is extra relevant in the AFC North because the Ravens were in first place last year. The Cincinnati Bengals were in last place. We will get into the numbers and the value before we dive into our first team. Warren has graciously provided us with prizes. We are going to give 3 lucky YouTube viewers a free copy of his Sharp Football Analysis 2024 NFL Preview. Here's how we'll choose our 3 winners. We are going to ask 3 trivia questions to our YouTube audience today. The first person to hit up the YouTube chat with the correct answer will win. Trivia question number 1, and this one is easy. 1966 was the first, 1966 was the first year of the Super Bowl era. The NFL had 15 total teams. Of those 15 teams, there are only 2 without a Super Bowl appearance. One is the Detroit Lions. Name the other one. Again, name it in the YouTube chat. We will be checking. All right. Let's start with the Ravens. 10-1 win the Super Bowl. Plus 140 to win the division. 10.5 is the season win total. Schedule 4th hardest according to season win totals aggregated and then checked by Warren Sharp. Again, we look at O-line and D-line. That is a key indicator for us on the quality of a team. O-line rank 25th. Not great. D-line, an uninspiring 12th. Warren, as a mid-Atlantic coaster, I will cede the floor to you. Thoughts on the Ravens?
Well, I can't start, by reading the chapter on the Ravens. I can't start talking about the 2024 Ravens before acknowledging how that offense changed in 2023, kicking Greg Roman out of there, bringing in a far more modern style of offense, and what that did to help the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, obviously, they were the number 1 seed, 13-4 record last year. It was very reminiscent of the offense that they were utilizing in the 2019 season when they first burst onto the scene, not from the style of offense, but from the intent. And that was to jump out and score points early in games. When I look back, and I wrote about this in the book, when I look back at the opening touchdown drive rate, how often are teams scoring touchdowns on that opening drive? In 2022, Greg Roman's last year, they were down at 6%, one of the worst in the NFL. Last year, they went all the way up to 42%, which was second best in the NFL. Their score rate of touchdowns in the first quarter was one of the best in the NFL, all the way up at 27% and improvement over 11% the prior year. They were much better on inside of the red zone as well, and in goal-to-go situations, which is shocking that a Lamar Jackson-led team is not efficient down inside of the red zone, but that's what they were during the last year of Greg Roman's term. They were, in the last 4 years that he was there, the number 1 most run-heavy and the number 3 slowest pace team in the NFL. Those massively changed last year. They were 15th in pace, 6th in pass rate, and they used a lot more 11 personnel, still one of the lower rates in the NFL, but they had been the lowest in the NFL for over a decade, 12% usage of 11 personnel. That went all the way up to 47%. So they get Derrick Henry now. And one of the things that I think is going to be interesting about that infusion of Derrick Henry is, what do defenses do to counter that? Because that's the way I always look at football is, what's the counter move by the defense? Well, obviously, I would think that they would try to load boxes more frequently. Well, Lamar Jackson was the NFL's number 1 quarterback versus loaded boxes last season. On 158 pass attempts that he faced loaded boxes, which was a lower rate than he had faced in prior years, obviously, because in prior years they were a run-focused offense, so they got more loaded boxes. Last year, fewer loaded boxes, but he was the number 1 quarterback in EPA per dropback, number 1 in success rate, number 3 in completion rate, number 4 in yards per attempt against loaded boxes. So that mesh point is going to be interesting to see if they load those boxes. Are they going to try to get some advantage there by doing some play action and throwing over the top of those linebackers where Lamar was excellent last year? They were better in play action under Todd Monken last year, and that was before having Derrick Henry as well. They also didn't really have a lot of luck factors go in their favor. This is something I know you guys over at Action focus a lot on, is some of the luck factors. But, from whether it was injury luck where they were 19th, or field goal luck where they were 23rd, or fumble luck where they were 21st, or penalty yards against where they were 31st, nothing was really massively going their way. I'm worried about their defense a little bit with the loss of the defensive coordinator. They promote from within. I'm worried about the change overhaul in their offensive line, where they lose Zeitler, Morgan Moses, and John Simpson. Simpsons and Zeitler were their two players that led the team in snaps along that line last year. Both of those guys are gone. Rest is massively in their favor. We talked about that in the podcast that I came on a couple of months ago, so I won't rehash all the rest elements. If you guys want to talk about it later, we can. But they're much better in rest. I do want to hear what you guys have to think about Lamar Jackson's weight cut, and I'll save my response to that for if you guys have a comment on your end. But overall, I think the Baltimore Ravens, because of the style of offense has been modernized so much, they are going to have an advantage with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry back there on offense, and offense dictating things in terms of scoring quickly, dictating the flow of the game. But I do have concerns. I don't think they're going to be as successful as they were last year. I have concerns along that offensive line. I have concerns with the passing attack as well. I still don't love their wide receiving core. I mean, Lamar Jackson still doesn't have an elite wide receiving core. Never has had that. The story is the same this upcoming season. So there's a lot to like about this team just because of Lamar and the new style of offense from last year. But there are more questions this year than there were last year. And for that reason, it's hard for me. I'm certainly not laying a future on the Ravens to win this division, right? I think it's going to be hard for them to repeat.
Simon, I think you and I agree. Like, this is not a team that for a future we're all that interested in right now.
No, we were sitting here last year with a better Ravens team getting 21-1, 20-1 on their Super Bowl futures. And now we're paying a premium because it feels like, Lamar's coming off an MVP, and people really don't look at what we're talking about here with Warren, right? Warren's breaking down their schedule, also breaking down the fact that, it's a big deal. They've lost guys in the offensive line. And you go to the defensive side, that's the biggest deal to me, right? Losing their defensive coordinator to Seattle, that's a big deal. Like, he was the perfect guy for that defense where he knew exactly what to do with Kyle Hamilton. Like, they were so in unison of him playing that Ed Reed role of wherever he wants to go, it worked on the defense. He was always in the right spot, which, again, we don't know yet what the new defense will look like, but I do know it's going to be a loss up front, right? Not having Patrick Queen, not having those veteran guys along the D-line, that's going to be a big deal. So, to me, this is a team that, even if Zay Flowers does take that next step and he does become a number one receiver for this team and a guy they can trust, it feels like they just lost too much. And last year was just the year. Last year, people don't remember because it feels so far away. We had no offense. Like, offense would kind of die in the NFL, especially by the time it got to January, December. It really had fallen off. This was a team where it just did not matter. Like, this team was so good until they ran into that Chiefs team. They were months of just dominating offense. It was just Lamar could get any throw he wanted, and when they wanted to run the ball, they could get any yards. Like, they were picking up 4 or 5 yards every time they carried the ball. It was just a machine. And then we talked about that defense last year. They were so good at playing with a lead. Once they had a lead on you, you were done. Like, it really was the perfectly set up team last year, the Ravens. And we see it all the time in football. It's regression. Like, you have the really high year. The following year, you take a step back because it's a lot of new guys. You usually lose coaches, right? Teams are going to just be different the following year. They're the perfect example of it, right? They were just so perfect last year. That was the year. Like, they had the team to take down the Chiefs. They had everything right there. They had the team to take down the 49ers. And it just didn't work out, right? Because, unfortunately, weird things happened in the playoffs. They kind of lost their mind there, and they had Lamar throwing the ball 40 times, and that's just not who they want to be. So I honestly don't mind what Lamar's doing with the weight, right? If that's what he feels comfortable playing at, if he feels quicker and that's better for Lamar, more power to him. Because people are like, oh, you might get hurt now. Like, no player thinks that way. No player is thinking to themselves, oh, if I lose 20 pounds or 10 pounds, I'm going to be more susceptible to injury. That doesn't really cross their mind. I don't know if there's science backing it up either, because if there was, I think their team would be putting pressure on him to put back on some muscles. So, yeah, their win total is 10.5, Chad. That's a rich for this division. We already talked about 10-1. We wouldn't pay that. And their division odds at plus 140. I just wouldn't touch either. There's another team we like better in this division. So, yeah, Ravens, small to the under for me, right? I have them at 10 wins. It's not that big of a discrepancy at 10.5. I just have them half a game under that win total. So, again, they won one coin flip game. I could easily see them hitting this win total, but to me, I would not be playing the over. It just does not feel like there's value there.
They're a spot bet team to me for this year. John Harbaugh, past 20 years, one of the most profitable coaches in the NFL. Bill Belichick, Mike McCarthy, Mike Zimmer, Sean Payton, Marty Schottenheimer, John Harbaugh, and then Jim Harbaugh. But can you name, excuse me, the most profitable coach week one, the past 20 years in the Action Network database?
Sean McVay.
John Harbaugh.
Oh, wow.
If we look at just week one, John Harbaugh is 12-4 against the spread and has failed to cover just once in the last 8 years. Reminder, and I know which side we like already, Baltimore is a field goal underdog at Kansas City in week one. Of course, we are taking the Ravens in week one against the Chiefs as 3-point underdogs. Simon, there's no question on that.
Yeah.
Like, there are going to be spots. Warren points out the rest. John Harbaugh is amazing on extra rest. If he's got 10 or more days to prepare, the Ravens are 27-8 straight up, 20-13-2 against the spread. Here are the 4 spots you're going to want to think about betting the Ravens in addition to week one. They've got 9 days rest before week 2 against the Raiders, 10 before November 17th game against the Steelers, 2 weeks before they play the Giants in mid-December, and 10 days before they play the Browns in the last week of the season. So, Warren, you talked about rest. I know we don't love the Ravens' futures, but there are good spots here for them to think about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of points to collab on both of what you guys have been saying. That John Harbaugh record in week one, I wonder if part of that is the way that he gets this team to play in the preseason, right? They approach the preseason with a far different intention. They're trying to win all of these games. That competitive fire is flowing in this team year in and year out in the preseason. Maybe that does actually have an advantage considering their number one coach team in the ATS world in your action database. So that could be a factor there. Absolutely. With regard to the spot edges, I want to add that I list all the spot edges in the book. And in addition to hopefully three of you guys are going to win a free book. If you just enter the code ACTION, you'll get 50% off the book. Special for your listeners today, 50% off the book, drops the price down to around just over $15. I think it's a great value for you. As it relates to their defense, one of the things that I will add is this defense played with the number 2 lightest boxes on average last season. And they were basically encouraging you to run the football against them. And their defense was terrible against the run. They ranked number 32 in EPA per rush, dead last in yards per carry, dead last in success rate on first half runs down the stretch of the season. They were playing with these light boxes. They were able to get away with that because they were playing with a lead so much because of their first half offense that you did not feel like you could run the ball late in games at all because you're playing from behind. And, you know, that everything is built off of like the game state that you're in. And I buy into this so much. And when I am talking to coaches, talking about this, about how you need to get out to those leads. And so, like, let's say the Baltimore Ravens struggle a little bit more this year at jumping out to leads. That's going to impact that second half defense a ton, and opponents are going to be able to run on them a little bit more in those situations. Last point to make on the team this year as it relates to the weight cut. One of the reasons that I think Lamar went ahead and did this, remember that picture that got tweeted out like a year ago or so, where Lamar has his gut sticking out, he's holding a bag of popcorn in one hand and a soda in another. Just made his rounds on Twitter. Lamar's yards per carry on scrambles have gone down precipitously year after year. He was averaging 10.4 in 2019, 10.4 yards per carry on scrambles. Last year, that was at in 2022, that was at 7.9. Last year, that had dropped all the way down to 6.6, despite the fact that he faced 7-man boxes on just 27% of those scrambles, which is a far lower rate than what he was facing before. So he had more opportunities to run, and he was scrambling for fewer yards per carry. When he blitzed and then scrambled, he dropped from 11.4 yards per carry from 2019 to 2022 all the way down to 4.7 yards per carry last year. So those like quick instinct decisions to go ahead and scramble, which are the number one most effective play in football. They're more effective than any type of drop back, than any type of route. If you have a designed pass play where the quarterback drops back and then he decides based on the look or the coverage or the pass rush that he wants to scramble and finds an open run lane, there is not a play out there that is more efficient at from an EPA perspective, from a yards per play perspective. And Lamar was terrible in those, relatively speaking, to earlier parts in his career. So if he can get a little bit more of that burst and quickness back, those first few steps to get through that offensive line and then make something positive on the scrambles, definitely are going to help, because he's dropping back to pass a lot more now in this offense than he was in prior iterations. So I agree completely with you guys. Spot play as opposed to future play.
It'll be interesting to see how operators think about Lamar Jackson's rushing totals game to game. Do they go by what his numbers have sort of descended to, or do they go by what the public opinion thinks and always shade it a little bit higher because they know that squares are generally going to bet Lamar Jackson over based on his reputation? All right. We love the Bengals, Simon. 13-1 to win the Super Bowl. We bet them at 20-1 early in the spring, plus 145 to win the division. Already feels too low. Their season win total is 10.5. Their strength of schedule is 6th easiest. O-line rank is 21. Really comes down to Orlando Brown Jr. Can he get back to the form that made him one of the better tackles in the leagues with the Ravens and with the Chiefs? Last year, in his first with the Bengals, he was kind of middling. D-line rank is also middling, 13th. Lost DJ Reader, which is tough. But they do have Trey Hendrickson, who is a dominant edge rusher. And when you have that, that helps raise the stakes for your performance. And they also have Lou Anarumo, who is still one of the most creative defensive coordinators in the league. So they have to be one of the leading candidates, along with the Carolina Panthers, Simon, for worst to first in the division.
Yeah, and we talk every year. There's always some lazy teams for us to have to do work on, and this is one of those teams where it's just like, oh, their star quarterback was hurt last year. Now they have a last place schedule. Don't overthink this, right? It's really that simple sometimes. And I think you touch on DJ Reader leaving is a big deal to me, right? That defense. I understand why there's people that have questions about their defense, and then you could go to their offensive line, and people have questions about the offensive line as well. And, to me and you talked about it, Chad, we think that organization is failing them right now, right? They're failing Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, he's already having major surgery on his wrist, right? I don't even know if he took something out of his leg and put it in his wrist, and they said he had a 50% chance just coming back from it, like having full motion in his wrist. So not only did he beat those odds, he beat the odds of him actually be able to come back and have, power and grip on throwing a football again. Like, that was not something that was guaranteed, which I couldn't believe. Like, it felt like that should have been a bigger story this offseason. It really wasn't. Because obviously it worked out, right? He's in camp. He's throwing dimes in the corner. It feels like he had 2 days where he had a little bit of rust, and now it's all gone. And every clip I've seen, it just looks like old Joe Burrow. So no worry there, right? So it does stink that their offensive line still has questions, right? I see in your notes here you have a little thing about Orlando Brown, right? Like, is he gonna be the guy we need him to be and really protect Joe Burrow? We don't have the answers for that, but what we do have the answers for is, we took it from Warren here. It's like the Ravens, who have the 6th hardest schedule or the 4th hardest schedule, because they're the 1 seed and have the first place schedule. This team, who was last, has one of the easiest schedules in football. That's a huge deal, people. Like, that really does matter. Especially when it's like, the Ravens might have a run where they go back to back. They might go to Houston. They might go to the Bills. They might go to the Chiefs. The Bengals don't have that. They're literally playing, the Patriots and like really bad 4th place teams from last year. So, yeah, it's all there, Chad. Obviously, we don't want people to bet their future odds. We already told people to bet in the spring at 20-1. Now it's down to 13, 14-1, a lot of books. I wouldn't bet that yet because we've seen historically Joe Burrow. I know he's been injured in the past and they've come out slow because of that. And he's not dealing with that right now. Historically, though, they do come out slow, this Bengals team and Joe Burrow. So you might be able to get better value in a couple of weeks after the season starts. If they start 1-2 or, 1-3, something crazy happens like that, you'll be able to get better value on that bet than betting it right now. Divisional odds, actually, I don't mind that, chat. Plus 140 divisional odds if you want to bet that. I still think there's some value there, the fact they're at a plus number, just because I do think they're right there with the Ravens skill level wise. But then you factor in the fact that they have that such an easier schedule. It's like, okay, that to me makes them the odds on favorite for this division right now, right? I think they're the best team, the most complete team. So yeah, if you want to take their over 10.5, you can. Depends on your book. It might be juiced at minus 150, minus 140. To me, if I don't want to pay that vig, because I've been paying vig in a lot of other places, I'll just take the plus 140 and let that ride. So I definitely like the division odds better than I do like their win total.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, I'm saying it's a little bit cheap, but I think that's just because in my head, the value of them is so much higher and the expectations are so much
Yeah.
higher. So it feels like plus 145. I'm just like, I feel like at that number, I'd want more. You make a really good point about Joe Burrow's career. So here's something interesting. 36, 22-1 against the spread overall. His ATS struggles are early in the season.
Yeah.
2-6 against the spread in his first 2 games of the year, 34-16 the rest of the time. That 2-6 mark is tied with Kirk Cousins for the worst mark of 59 quarterbacks since Joe Burrow was drafted. The first 2 games this year, Patriots -9. There's a lot of reasons why we might bet the Patriots. We haven't gotten to week
We
1
said
yet,
if it's
but
percent, we're probably going to do it.
yeah, exactly. And then they play the Chiefs, and there's no line set yet. Warren, thoughts on the Bengals? I agree with Simon. This is not an overthinking one. Top 3 quarterback in the NFL who didn't play last year, kind of gets forgotten, coming back, playing the 6th easiest schedule. Nothing else really matters.
Yeah, I think in this case, a simple is better. I will say that Brissett better be starting week 1. I've got some bets that Brissett, I was laying like minus 400 that Brissett is and higher. I think that Brissett will start week 1. Over
It's looking good.
So I think he should be there. But if you look at Joe Burrow, like he only played 5 true games where he was viewed as 100%. And the Bengals went 4-1, and not just 4-1 last year in those games. Think about who they played. The 49ers, the Bills, the Seahawks, the Cardinals. Now we know the Cardinals were down. Those other 3 teams, fine, 2 of them exceptional. And then they lost to the Texans 30-27 on a field goal as time expired, right? So like that was a back and forth game against CJ Stroud late in the year when CJ Stroud was absolutely balling. So, and this is a team that I think the Bengals are solid. I don't love the loss of DJ Reader. When we talk about Lou Anarumo though, he was put in a difficult situation last year, and we kind of knew that heading into the season. They lost both their starting safeties from 2022. So you've got a defense coordinator that is used to changing things up. You know, Simon knows this too. Like every single game plan that he creates, he's sort of like Spags in a sense. They come up with something, try something new, make those halftime adjustments. He's so good in the second half. That's hard to do when you don't have good safeties there, when your safeties are both brand new as they were last year. And so it kind of was easier to anticipate that they might take a little bit of a step back. And they did. They fell off. They were number 9 in 22. They dropped all the way down to number 32 last year when defending early downs. That's got to regress. That's got to improve a little bit this upcoming season. I predict that they're going to play the number 1 easiest schedule of passing offenses this year. In addition, they get to face inexperienced quarterbacks and first and second year players. Think about all the young quarterbacks that Lou Anarumo's defense is going to go up against. Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, if Drake May plays, we'll see. It could be obviously be Jacoby Brissett instead, hopefully. Will Levis, Aiden O'Connell, and Bryce Young. I mean, so that's a very nice schedule of like some younger, inexperienced quarterbacks that they get to play. When you look at a nutshell of the Cincinnati Bengals last year and put this into context, They played the number one toughest schedule. They played 11 games versus playoff teams, which was the most of any team in the NFL since 2000. They played 14 games versus teams that were over 500. That was tied for the most of any team since 2000. Despite that brutal schedule, despite that Joe Burrow played only 5 true games where he played healthy all the way through, missing or injured for 12 of 17 games, the Bengals went 9-8 and still nearly made the playoffs. And that is absurd. This year, they're playing the number 6 easiest schedule, the number 1 biggest year-over-year improvement for any team. I love all of that. The 2 things that I will say is like caveats besides DJ Reader's loss. Number 1, that offensive line, which you guys already hit on. This team on pass block win rate, they've ranked number 30, and number 27 the last 3 years. They're the only offensive line to rank 27th or worse in both 2021 and 2022, and they still didn't solve that last year in 2023. That is measured not by your quarterback. That is measured just by how well does that offensive line block the defensive line and allow them past them using, the dots and the chips and the players. So that is obviously very concerning. Why they don't give Joe Burrow better protection and emphasize that, that's a concern. Hopefully it improves this year. It arguably can't get worse though. So that's the only positive, but it needs to improve. And then it's the fact that, yes, while they play an easy schedule, and we talked about this the last time that I was on, while they play an easy schedule, they have the most difficult prep and rest schedule from a timing perspective. And that's what I look at a lot. They play the 3 games in 10 days, which isn't great. And they play that late in the season also. They also play 3 short week road games. Their game week 4 in Carolina is off of a Monday night football game. They play week 10 in Baltimore. That's a Thursday night game. So that's on a short week. And week 15, they play in Tennessee after a Monday night football game. No team plays more than 3 short week road games this year. And they played 3 short week road games last year. So that's got to be frustrating from like a scheduling perspective, why the league continues to give the Bengals 3 short week road games for back-to-back years when no other team has to deal with that. That's pretty absurd. They're also playing those 3 games in 10 days, which is annoying late in the season. So that provides a little bit of difficulty for them. But overall, I would agree that the upside is there from a personnel perspective. I thought it was admirable what the coaches were able to do with the backup quarterback in there. Some people aren't in on Zach Taylor nearly as much. I was not myself, but seeing what he was able to do last year with their backup quarterbacks have made me like the play calling and the offensive mind of Zach Taylor a little bit more. This would be a team that I would be rather buying on than selling this year. I think that there are going to be spots for them. The only thing I will say, if you're looking to buy them late, and Simon was saying maybe they start 1-2, 1-3, that first month of the season, they're playing New England, Carolina, and Washington, 3 teams that have either young and experienced quarterbacks or aren't viewed as good teams. That toughest game is going to be that game against the Kansas City Chiefs in week 2. So they could start out a little bit hot. And if you're betting they're over in win total, you hope that they do, because that stretch run down later and on in the season is a little bit more difficult. But this is going to be a fun team to watch this year. And I really hope, for the good of your bets, potentially my bet, if I decide to tail you on this one, as well as the league in general, we want Joe Burrow to be good. This NFL, the league is so much more fun when Joe Burrow is balling out and playing hard and is healthy. And so I hope that that's the case all the way through, and this offensive line protects him a little bit better.
Well, it's kind of amazing that the Bengals have now spent multiple years with Joe Burrow injured at the end of the year or injured coming into training camp, and they still have not figured out how to prioritize protecting Joe Burrow. So yeah, for all of our sakes, let's make sure that the Bengals, let's hope that the Bengals have done that in some capacity. Before we dive into our next team, here's our second trivia question to our YouTube viewers to win a free copy of Warren's Sharp Football Analysis 2024 NFL Preview. The first person to hit up the YouTube chat with the correct answer will win. Trivia question number 2. There have been 11 different players who have won multiple NFL MVP awards. 2 of them played their entire careers for a current AFC North team. The first is Jim Brown. Who is the other? I know it. It's a little bit of a tricky question because it makes you assume that their career is over. Interesting question. Interesting phrasing. Speaking of Jim Brown and the Cleveland Browns, Cleveland 40-1, plus 600. The win total is 8.5. Their O-line rank is 4th. Wyatt Teller, Joel Bitonio, both top 20 rated guards. Ethan Posick, top 15 center. Their offensive line is built to do exactly what Kevin Stefanski wants it to do. It is why the Browns continued to perform for most of the year last year, even after they had so many injuries with Nick Chubb and Deshaun Watson. D-line rank is 4th. Myles Garrett, defending defensive player of the year. Also argue like he is one of the few defensive linemen who is worth a point against the point spread. This is like J.J. Watt, 2012 level dominance. Look, it's going to come down to Deshaun Watson. And I should say the Browns have the 3rd hardest schedule. So it's not going to be an easy run for them. What do we think of Deshaun Watson right now, Simon?
I mean, everything you see, it's same old Deshaun Watson in camp. Can't hit guys in stride. He's overthrowing guys when they were open deep. It's just, we talk about whatever happened to him, Chad. It's just not the same guy. And there's nothing more glaring than seeing Joe Flacco step into that offense and look like an all-pro. Like, all the pieces are so set up there for Deshaun Watson to succeed. It's like the best offensive line you can dream of. Amari Cooper, you forgot how great of a player he was until Joe Flacco came back. It's just like that's the thing that just stands out to me. It's like all the weapons are there. I mean, Joe Flacco didn't even have Nick Chubb, and they were still running the ball with, I think it might have been Ford was running for like 5-6 yards a pop. Like that offensive line's incredible. You didn't even touch on it. That O-line coach is gone. Like that's a big deal to me. They might be
That's
4th
true.
ranked.
Yeah.
I guarantee you next year, Chad, we're talking about this, they'll be back down to 8 or 10, right? That's how big of a deal I think having a coach like that lead them. So this is a team I don't know what to do with. Last year, me and you loved their over. We were all in on it because we were just in love with their defense. We were in love with their offensive line. And we thought, okay, Deshaun Watson's had a full off season. He'll get right now, right? Like the jitter should be gone. We got lucky he got hurt. Because, I mean, we probably would have got there with the defense by itself, but, you know, we needed Joe Flacco to come in.
It was going to be close.
It was going to be close. So, I feel on them right now, like I'm looking at the book, they're over 8.5 is -140, -135 on Bet365 right now. I'm tempted to take it just because of this defense. Like, Schwartz, man, he's just got these guys humming. And, like, Myles Garrett, I can't see him letting this team be below 9 wins. It's like, I do believe in that defense that much. But it's just hard with Watson. He's so inconsistent, and it's. I mean, you touched on it. They have a tougher schedule as well, but you know, I'm very hesitant to take this under. I guess I'm indecisive at this point, but their divisional odds wouldn't touch them. I still think this is either Ravens or Bengals. The book's got this right, having the Ravens and Bengals so much higher. You know, both of them plus 140, and then having these guys plus 600, and I think Pittsburgh's like plus 800. That's how it should be in this division. It's like. Those two guys are definitely the kings of this division. So just viewing this Browns team, I'm sad to say that it's like if they had a guy, if they had maybe kept Baker, who knows, right, Chad? Like that's the saddest part of all of this. It's like, you know, they try to do something that felt smart and right, going to get a guy who's proven, who's done it for a couple of years. Little did they know that he might just be mentally broken, which is what we talked about with Watson. So I want to get behind this team because I love what they have so much on the defensive side and their offensive line and their offensive weapons. But it's just not doing it for me right now. So I'm going to lean towards the over, but I'm not putting anything on it.
Bill Callahan was the offensive line coach last year, who you've talked about, who's one of the most highly regarded offensive line coaches of the past 20 years in the NFL. Went to join his son, Brian Callahan, as the offensive line coach, supporting him. And the Tennessee Titans, Brian is the new head coach there. Deshaun Watson, the best game he had last year was when his shoulder nearly fell off and he was clearly shot up with so many painkillers that he finally played well. But his season was done after that. Under 60% completion percentage, with the Browns versus over 67 with Houston, 5.3 touchdown rate with the Texans, 4.1 touchdown rate with the Browns, passer rating over 100 with Houston, near 80 with Cleveland. Warren, it feels like they missed a window. They had their shot last year if Deshaun had been able to be Deshaun with the way things played out and with how good this defense is.
Well, especially now that they have to pay Deshaun Watson this exorbitant rate from a salary cap perspective that kicked in this season, continues for the next several years. The thing that I struggle with, and it's a great callback to Baker Mayfield, Simon, with regards to what this team was looking like back in those early years. Remember, Kevin Stefanski came in the COVID year, it was his first season coaching, and they went to the playoffs, and he got Baker Mayfield to play somewhat well, and he won Coach of the Year that year in 2020. One of the things that they were doing really well that year and into the next year was they were doing what Kevin Stefanski brought from Minnesota, which was a lot of heavier sets and play action out of these heavier sets. And they rarely used 11 personnel. It was 36% usage of 11 personnel on early downs in the first three quarters in 2020, and 2021 was still only 37%. Once they got Watson, they've ratcheted that up massively. Last year, they were all the way up at 66% early downs in the first three quarters. They used 3+ wide receivers on 71% of early downs in the first three quarters. That was the sixth highest rate in the NFL. The thing is, Deshaun Watson was much better when he was using two tight end sets rather than of 12 personnel rather than of 11 personnel. He averaged nearly 2 more yards per pass attempt when he was passing the ball with two tight ends out on the football field. His EPA per play was +1.3. His EPA per play in 11 personnel was -0.02 early downs in the first three quarters. So this is the situation that I struggle with. Is I think Stefanski is a forward-thinking good coach, but he's doing what he thinks Watson wants, which is a lot of spread and 11 personnel. But Watson has been better from 12, and Stefanski's offense is better from 12. If you forget all the quarterbacks, Stefanski arrives in 2020, throw them all into the mix, take their name tags off, all the different quarterbacks that have played in Cleveland. If you look at what he's done over those 4 years, 20, 21, 22, 23, 11 personnel, they're -0.05 EPA. 12 personnel, they're +0.18. 11 personnel, they average 6.8 yards per attempt. 12 personnel, they average 8.1. We're talking about from the number 22 offense all the way to the number 7 offense, or the number 25 offense to the number 5 offense when they're in 12 personnel versus 11. They just are better out of 12. Stefanski's offense is decidedly better there. And Watson has been better as well, but they just don't want to go in that route, it looks like. And so I just have concerns about like what this offense is going to look like. And I certainly don't think they're going to use a lot of 12. They were in the Ayuk sweepstakes. Like they wanted another wide receiver. And so they're trying to lean into, if Watson doesn't play well, we are all screwed. And we need Watson to play well because we gave him all this guaranteed money. Let's figure out ways to get great wide receivers in here. As it relates to the other side of the ball on the defense.
Well, hold on, Warren. Let me just cut you off for 1 sec. That is a great point that I have not heard anybody make about the 11 personnel versus the 12 personnel and Deshaun Watson, because it speaks to so many things. It speaks to maybe what Kevin Stefanski is thinking about how he wants to manage the quarterback. It speaks to maybe what Kevin Stefanski is feeling because his owner gave gobs and gobs of guaranteed money to Deshaun Watson. That is fascinating way to think about this team in a dysfunctional context. Brilliant. Love it.
Yeah, no, it's something that I've been thinking about just by looking at the personnel and just knowing Stefanski. I was on him Coach of the Year in 2020. I thought his system would mesh well with Baker Mayfield. Obviously, Baker didn't work out and he wasn't perfect here, but it's just they've changed a lot of things to acquiesce to Deshaun Watson's preferred style of play. It's not really the bag for Stefanski, and it hasn't worked out for Watson either. On the other side of the ball, yes, great defense. And yes, Jim Schwartz has been very good from the way that he's calling this defense. If you look, though, at the quarterbacks that they played last year, they played a lot of bad quarterbacks last year, and they had a lot of success against those bad quarterbacks. The positive is that they were terrible from a health perspective. They were 27th, so maybe they'll be better from a health perspective this upcoming season. I still think the defense is going to be great. And if you look visually at the way that this schedule is laid out, there's like after that week 1 game against the Dallas Cowboys in Cleveland, there's 2 real defined pockets of easy opponents back to back to back. And then there's like several streaks of very difficult opponents. And they end the season in a very difficult run playing against the Chiefs, against the Bengals, against the Dolphins. At least that game's in Cleveland where Tua struggles out in the cold potentially. And then against the Ravens. Those are 4 playoff caliber teams that they're going to play down the stretch. So, if you have backed them over in their win total, and then you have the ability to hedge a little bit late if they still aren't there, that's something that could be to your advantage. But I agree with Simon. This is a tough team to peg from a wins perspective, just because they have a lot of the pieces. So much is just dependent upon, is the quarterback going to work this year? And from a skill perspective, you would say he's bound to. It can't continue like this, but you just never know. And I'm interested to see what ends up happening if we get to see his backup in there, Jameis Winston, this upcoming season at all.
All right. I don't want to shortchange the last team in the AFC North, which is the Steelers. And to me, one of the most intriguing teams and one of the most controversial teams from a betting point of view that a lot of people are trying to figure out what to do with their season win total. Before we dive into our next team, we'll ask our final trivia question to our YouTube viewers to win a free copy of Warren's Sharp Football Analysis 2024 NFL Preview. Thank you to Warren for giving those away. The first person to hit up the YouTube chat with the correct answer will win. Trivia question number 3. One NFL team has gone over their season win total for 4 consecutive seasons. The longest active streak. Name that team. Give us your answer in the chat. All right, the Pittsburgh Steelers. 50-1 to win the Super Bowl. Plus 800 to win the division. 8.5 is the season win total. Hardest schedule in the NFL. O-line. 8th overall. But I think there's a lot of questions. Especially on the right side. D-line, 8th as well. TJ Watt isn't a defensive lineman, but he's obviously a top 2 or 3 edge rusher and defensive player when he's healthy. The team is just different when he is on the field. We know that. We bet that. Cameron Hayward, still a presence, showed some signs of age last year. Look, Warren, it's the basic question. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season as a head coach. It has been guaranteed money to bet on the Pittsburgh Steelers with Mike Tomlin as the head coach. Russell Wilson is the starting quarterback. Justin Fields is the backup. Warren Sharp. Is this the year you fade the Steelers win total?
So I think the NFL absolutely has set it up for that to be the case.
Didn't they though? Boy.
They absolutely did. And actually, Mike North, who is the head guy from a scheduling perspective, his immediate interviews after the schedule was released, he already was talking about this storyline. This is a baked-in storyline for the NFL season. He already was talking about how tough that Steelers run is late in the year, and will they be able to continue this streak for Mike Tomlin? And so they stacked this schedule. I have never seen before from week 11 onward that a team plays every single one of their divisional games from a week 11 onward. I've calculated back. I don't see that ever happening previously. And then you take into consideration the only 2 teams that they play that aren't in their division from week 11 onward are the Chiefs and the Eagles, right? The 3-time potentially trying to get 3-time Super Bowls in a row, the Chiefs and the Eagles, who are obviously a good team year in and year out, one that went to the Super Bowl in 2022. So it's a brutal schedule down the stretch. They have to bank wins early if they're going to come close to this at all. They have to bank wins, and their schedule is easier to start, but it's not super easy. They're still playing the Dallas Cowboys. You're still playing the Jets if Aaron Rodgers is there. You still have to play John Harbaugh's LA Chargers. So, and the Falcons if they're going to be a turnaround team this year. So they've got those teams in the first half of the schedule, and then they got that ridiculous run late. So that's going to be a challenge for them. People are really critical of Arthur Smith because what they saw down in Atlanta. And I understand that, especially from the fantasy perspective. A lot of guys who had Bijan Robinson and were really disappointed at the way he was utilized and some of the talking points that came out in the press conferences. I get it. Some people don't really like Arthur Smith. The only thing I'll say is this. There's no way Arthur Smith is any worse than what's been going on in Pittsburgh for the last several years. I mean, the offensive coordinating situation in Pittsburgh has been terrible. I'll throw this trivia point out to you guys both. Through week 4, the Pittsburgh Steelers offense led by Matt Canada had 26 drives in the first half of games, 26 first half drives. How many made it to the red zone? Of the 26 drives in the first half, the first 4 weeks, how many made it to the red zone?
0.
I was gonna say like 5.
You're very close. You're very close. One out of 26 drives actually made it to the red zone in the first half. This team was not creative. They were not aggressive, and they were far too predictable with Matt Canada as the play caller. The difference that's going to happen is threefold this year, in my opinion, based upon what I know about Arthur Smith. Number one, a lot more play action. We are going to see a ton more play action. The Pittsburgh Steelers have ranked 31 in play action usage rate for multiple years in a row. The Falcons use play action at the number 4 highest rate. We are going to see a lot more play action in the offense. That's first. Number 2, we are going to see a lot more heavier personnel groupings in Pittsburgh. Now, I don't know if they end up getting Ayuk and if that changes anything or not, but Arthur Smith loves to operate out of heavier personnel. They used 11 personnel last year. That's 3 wide receivers at the lowest rate of any team in the NFL. The Pittsburgh Steelers were at number 7 in highest usage rate, 71% for the Steelers, 17%, the exact inverse from a number perspective, 17% for the Falcons, which was the lowest in the NFL. They used the highest rate of 2 tight end sets. So we're going to see more 2 tight ends out on the field. And then I think we're going to see deeper passes down the field. The Atlanta Falcons love to run the ball early. That's not going to change. The Steelers were running it a lot. The Falcons are going to run, the Steelers were running a lot before Arthur Smith. They're going to run it a lot after Arthur Smith. He likes to run the football. He runs the ball out of heavier sets to set up deeper shots down the field. And that's one of the things the Atlanta Falcons did a lot last year. They were number 4 in rate of passes that were traveling downfield, whereas the Denver Broncos, I'm saying Denver because of Russell Wilson, were dead last. And this is where I think Justin Fields actually could play a role. If you look at the last 2 years, I know Russell Wilson is famous for this moon ball down the field, but actually Justin Fields is better throwing the ball deeper down the field. Chad, I mean, you know, from your experience with him, he has his faults and he's gotten his sacks and they haven't had a lot of receivers to work with in Chicago, but he has been better than Russell Wilson has over the last 2 years combined at throwing the ball deep down the field. And I think that they're going to be able to gain some edge with his mobility and his scrambling, which is better, obviously, than Russell Wilson. So I'm interested to see how this quarterback battle ultimately plays out, but I just don't think that this offense is suddenly going to be a disaster because they've got Arthur Smith. It's been a disaster before. Arthur Smith can only help improve things a little bit, but this schedule is so daunting.
The end of the season, you pointed it out. This is the schedule. Ravens, Browns, Bengals, Browns, Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, Bengals. Simon, it's like the schedule makers went full WWE on Mike Tomlin. They know his penchant for beating the season win totals and winning as an underdog. It's like they're daring us to play the Steelers and daring the Steelers and Mike Tomlin to continue this streak.
Yeah, and I joke with you. This is a team that when I make my annual trip to Vegas in May, I take the over. It's just something I do every year. And it's the first time in my life as a professional bettor that I had all the pros around me being like, no, this is the year to go under. And I hate looking at the schedule ahead of time like that and trying to predict wins and losses, Chad. But like you said, you look at that schedule, you don't need to start doing predictions, right? You can just look at it and go, oh, that's brutal. And then you factor in last year, things just bounced right for this team.
Yeah.
Like they caught teams when they had their backups in, even their win against the Ravens. I think the Ravens were winning 13-3 in that game. They're dominating the entire game. They had a fluke, 50-yard touchdown. Then I think they had a turnover, get another touchdown. All of a sudden they win that game. It's like, that's where Tomlin makes his living. He muddies the water and they can get these kind of crazy wins. I want to love them too, because Arthur Smith is a guy that, me and you made a ton of money off him when he was with Tennessee. Like that combo with him and Vrabel, that was the perfect combo. And I think he has that once again with Tomlin. It's like his type A personality will fit well with a guy who's even more type A. It's like no one gets better than Tomlin. So to me, I wanted to love this team, want to love this defense, want to love the improvements they made, but the quarterbacks just don't do it for me. Like Russell Wilson, he's in a perfect system last year with the perfect head coach. Like Sean Payton, he doesn't it doesn't get much better than having a guy like him with you. And he was totally out on him. He was willing to eat $60 million in dead money this year just to get this guy off that team and out of that locker room. Justin Fields, a guy I mean you believed in. We kept thinking he'd take that next step. And he just is not. He's not worked on the footwork that needed to work on. He still has happy feet. And I mean, you had this incredible stat last year that just hung with me all offseason when I tried betting this team. No one struggled more in the fourth quarter than Justin Fields. It was incredible. For the first three quarters, he'd excel. The fourth quarter, he fell off a cliff. He was by far the worst quarterback in the league in fourth quarter win rate and success rate. So this is a team that I understand why people want to blindly bet this. It's 8.5 to the win total. It's plus 120 if you want to take the over, minus 150 to the under. I'm going to take the under. Like this team has seven wins, 6 wins written all over it. Just not even the fact the way it ends this year. It's just the whole schedule. Like their whole schedule is just brutal. I don't think they're going to have all the injury luck they've kind of had these last couple of years. Like Tomlin, you just said it, Chad. It's just a law of averages. This guy's been playing with crazy luck and house money. And he's also such a great coach, like we talked about in our luck rankings. But it has to finally catch up to him at some point. And the hardest division in football, to me, if everyone's staying healthy, these teams are still what we think they're going to be. How do you not pick this team to be the fourth team in this division? It's just too many questions to me at this point. So makes sense that, the public is still taking their over, but it makes even more sense that this is like the team the professionals are circling. So again, not one of my bigger bets. Like my biggest bet's still Bengals to win this division, but I'm on the under 8.5 here, Chad.
Yeah, you wanna back Tomlin so badly because
You
you've
do.
seen what he's done over the years with quarterbacks who had no business being in the NFL. But he also had much better defenses then, right? We're talking about the Duck Hodges years. And even last year, you always have to ask the question, is he making his own luck or is he blessed by the stars, right? Steelers are week 1 dogs at the Falcons. The Steelers have won at a 63% clip against the spread as an underdog under Mike Tomlin, making him the most profitable coach as a dog in the past 20 years. Mike Tomlin is the best coach against the spread, period, the past 20 years. Like, he knows something. He does something. He is able to get his team motivated. One of my favorite TikTok videos right now is like the 5 best Mike Tomlin moments. And one of them is he's walking through the tunnel to the game and there's a fan who screams like, yeah, Mike, let's go get him. And he goes, leave me the fuck alone. I'm working here. Like the guy is just intense and he is ready. And we love that. We know Matt Mitchell loves to put the Mike Tomlin drops in the show. He is our most animated, favorite, brilliant, motivating tactician of a coach. Like you cannot discount how brilliant he is a coach, which is why it makes it scary to bet that under 8.5. And like Warren, feet to the fire. In your answer, you did not tell me if you were going over or under 8.5 on the Steelers.
No, so I would be going under if I had to. And here's one other factor that you guys mentioned, and I wasn't thinking of this before, but it's perfect that stat Simon mentioned about Justin Fields that you shared earlier, Chad. The Steelers were 9-2 in 1-score games last year. Think about what that means if Justin Fields ends up getting inserted as the starting quarterback and then he is struggling in the fourth quarter of these games. Suddenly, it's almost impossible for you to go 9-2 in these close games if he is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL in those situations. And certainly from a luck factor standpoint, you have the Steelers. I've got on one of the pages in the book, the critical and game deciding stats. Steelers were plus 11 in turnover margin last year. They were plus 11 in sack margin, plus 2 in turnover margin, and plus 4 in penalty margin. And if they don't do all of those things again this year, and the biggest one to me is the sacks. I mean, turnovers are obviously a big factor too. Those will decide games more than any other statistic. But a quarterback like Justin Fields getting inserted there and not and taking more sacks. Sacks are absolute drive killers. The rate at which you score points when you take a sack on a drive is cut into a third. You score points at a third of the rate if you take a sack on a drive. And we know his propensity to take sacks. That's going to potentially impact turnovers. And then his fourth quarter performance, absolutely frightening. And then you factor in that schedule. So I believe that the schedule makers have this hope that they can play it up as long as possible. In a perfect world for the NFL and the schedule makers, it would come down to they've got him playing on Christmas. It would come down to those last couple of weeks of the season. Can Mike Tomlin win the next 2 games and get to over 500? Like, this is going to be something you're going to turn on your TV on Christmas and you are going to hear the announcer say something like that. I firmly believe they'll be right underneath that mark. As they enter, they're going to need to win this game to be able to get there, and they're not going to get it done against, who do they play? I think the Kansas City Chiefs, either the Chiefs or the Ravens on Christmas. I forget. I think it's the Chiefs on Christmas in Week 17. It's going to be brutal for them. So this is a narrative that's going to play out. I think Simon's guys are right. This is the year to go the opposite way on the Steelers.
So you mentioned the Steelers were 9-2 in 1-score games. That was the best mark in the NFL. They've been over 500 straight up in 1-score games for 8 straight years and 500 straight up or better in 10 consecutive seasons. In fact, the best straight up 1-loss mark in 1-score games since 2007. Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, New England. We know Indy and New England had Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Pittsburgh had Ben Roethlisberger, obviously, but he got hurt a lot. So what they really had was Mike Tomlin. So this is if you're betting the under, and a lot of people feel that way, as Simon said, if you're betting the under, hold your nose, close your eyes, hang on to the handrail of that roller coaster, and you better just pray, because you are betting at your peril against Mike Tomlin. Cue the drop. There's got to be a great drop here. Trivia question answers for those interested. Number 1, the trivia question answer was Cleveland Browns. I can't remember what the question.
Never make it to a Super Bowl.
Never made it to a Super Bowl. Number 2, multiple time MVP with the same team. That would be Lamar Jackson. Number 3, the answer was the Pittsburgh Steelers. The question was, one NFL team has gone over their season win total for 4 consecutive seasons. All right, Warren Sharp. That was fantastic. Everyone should check out Sharp Football Analysis. We appreciate Warren offering the books to everybody. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day, they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Simon and I will return with our next episode of The Favorites on the Action Network YouTube page this Tuesday, 1:45 p.m. Eastern, to talk AFC East with special guest Michael Lombardi. Download us from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe. Leave us 5 stars. Say whatever you want. Feedback is a gift. Till next time. Love you.